We're on the air.
Welcome to the Planning Board meeting for Long Hill Township. This is our regular meeting and hearing dated February 25th, 2025. Our start time is at 7:30 on the dot.
Perfect.
Great.
All right.
Would you mind reading the announcements?
Happy to.
Thank
Number
you.
1, call to order and statement of compliance. Adequate notice of this meeting or hearing has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting hearing dates on the municipal bulletin board and website, by sending a copy to the Echo Sentinel newspaper, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Number 2, standard board procedures. Any meeting or hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial meeting or hearing must be maintained at all times. Number 3, electronic devices. All in attendance are asked to mute cell phones or any electronic devices as to not interrupt the proceedings. Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Where do we need to do an oath?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Swearing still.
Welcome officially, Teresa. Come on.
Okay, only 2 were my fault. One was canceled. I'm sorry.
You're great. You're
Yeah.
totally in.
You've got to come to every meeting after tonight. You realise that? Every meeting.
No.
Okay, so Ms. Dill, I'm going to need you to raise your right hand for me. We'll swear you in. And just repeat after me. I, Teresa Dill,
I, Teresa Dill,
do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of New Jersey,
and the state of New Jersey,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same
and to the governments established in the United States
and to the governments established in the United States
and in this state
and in this state
under the authority of the people,
under the authority of the people,
and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
perform all the duties of
perform all the duties of
Planning Board Class 2 member
Planning Board Class 2 member
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
and that I will not use my office to grant preferential treatment,
and that I will not use my office to grant preferential treatment
nor to seek personal gain, favor, or advantage
nor to seek personal gain, favor, or advantage
not available to the general public.
not available to the general.
So help me God. If you want to do that part. Okay, there she is. She's
Welcome.
Well done.
on board.
Well done. Very nice.
Official.
Done.
Now,
Pass that down to that, please.
Thanks, Deb.
Ms. Dill,
Present.
Mr. Hands,
Here.
Committeeman Lavender,
Present.
Mr. Lavario,
Here.
Mr. Mitchell is excused this evening. Ms. Ogins,
Here.
Mr. Opalka,
Here.
Vice Chairman Jones is excused this evening. Chairman Richardson,
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, we have a fairly abbreviated meeting this evening, and we're going to move right into some old and new business. So first up, my hope is that everyone now has had a good amount of time with our board bylaws and can offer, if they have any additional comments or discussion points that they'd like to raise before, my hope is making a motion to accept these bylaws.
If I could just tee it up, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
the version that you guys were distributed incorporates comments from Mr. Hands, Ms. Oggins, and Mr. Lavario. I didn't receive comments from anybody else, so presumably nobody else had issues with it. There were a few points in here that might be worthy of discussion.
Great, why don't you
But,
summarize?
yeah, we can start off with that. Mr. Hands actually had a comment about if you look at section 1:1-10, I'm looking at the red line version, so that's page 10 on there. So we're all on the same page with which version we're looking at here. You had a note about section A, and we had a discussion about this at the last meeting. That section reads, board members shall not discuss, or no, I'm sorry, Mr. Lavario brought this up. Board members shall not discuss the substance of any current or pending application except in the specific context of a properly noticed board hearing. I mean, it is kind of the law that you're supposed to discuss only within that context. Now, I mean, you have some latitude to ask questions of the board attorney or the board professionals before, a meeting, but that's not really, again, it's kind of limited to just that circumstance, and you really shouldn't be discussing it with any other board members outside, because theoretically, it could prejudice an applicant. It could be violation of their constitutional rights if they're not there to address, questions about it. So, just with that, I just wanted to leave it as it
Right.
was,
Yeah.
But so I hope
I read your note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
Okay. So just, that was one. There were just a few that I highlighted. There were other, various like small changes, like for tire example. For example, we discussed jeans being okay. So I just changed
Nice
it.
jeans.
Nice, yes.
I just added the word ripped in front of jeans. So I think probably everyone would agree that's probably not appropriate attire for a board meeting. But otherwise, it's pretty silent as to regular unripped jeans. So I guess have at it if you want to wear that. Let me just sift through. Otherwise, there weren't too many other comments. Bear with me one moment. Otherwise, I incorporated everything that they suggested. I did, if you look at section 2:3-5, I combined what was old 2:3-5 with old 2:3-6. There was order of proceedings, then order of presentation, at the suggestion of Mr. Hands. And to me, that made actually a lot of sense because it kind of synthesized those and made it a little less repetitive.
Yep.
So you guys would notice that big, it's fairly substantial change, I guess. And then there's one or two other points I just wanted to get to. Yeah, then there was Rule 2:5, specifically 2:5-2 was non-appearance of party. So I think Mr. Hand suggested that we either eliminate that or combine it with, I think 2:5-6, dismissal without prejudice. I think, I think it's a stylistic thing, but I felt it was better to keep both sections, just so there's just a specific reference to non-appearance, because I feel like that's a little more common of an occurrence. And people would be more, apt to look for something like that if they wanted to know what happens if somebody doesn't show up, as opposed to having to sift through dismissal without prejudice to find out that if they don't show up, then their application could be dismissed. So again, it's a stylistic thing. I'm not really wedded to it one way or another.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah. Just cleaned up some language with 2:6-2. The only other major change was with the annual review procedure of the rules. I don't know if the board feels like it would rather have it be set in stone that it has to be reviewed every year, or that it should be just like, maybe we will, maybe we won't. So it's kind of up to you guys how you want to word that section. And this is, 3:5-1 on page 32. The way I initially worded it was that it would basically the board may appoint a bylaws committee, which should, provide results by the end of April that year.
And that would be at the direction of the chairperson, right?
Right. But the way it's worded now was that, I think Mr. Lavarerio suggested this as well, and I think we did
Yeah.
discuss it kind of at the last meeting too, is the way it's worded right now is that it basically says, essentially you have to create the subcommittee every year as the chairman. So it's, again, it's whether you guys want to actually set that in stone or not is up to you.
Does anybody feel strongly about that being kind of more of a mandatory item for review? I mean, because the sequencing would be, in theory, that would be brought up in January after the reorganization meeting, early in the year, with regards to, are there any changes
I think-
proposed to the bylaws?
No, I think it reads the way it should read. I mean, if someone raises an objection to the bylaws, that would ensue a discussion, and we would talk about having a committee to review them,
Yeah,
Right.
right? Otherwise,
Yep.
it's busy
that
work.
was my feeling. We've got enough to do without necessarily having to review the bylaws every year.
Well, originally it says if so established, now we're saying established, so can I just confirm we're saying it will be established?
I'm looking at it again, I think
Establish.
I might have messed up on the edits here.
Yeah,
So at the way it reads now is first sentence, the board chairperson may appoint up to 4 board members. Initially, I meant to change that to shall to make it mandatory in case you guys wanted to go that route, but,
So right now it's written as though it's
No.
mandatory to establish it.
well, the way it reads now is may appoint. So if you want to keep it as may, then,
It's not mandatory.
No, it says may appoint up to
the
4.
version we have,
Yeah, it says may appoint up to 4, which means you can go to 4, but
Yeah.
you can do 3, you could do 2. That's
Right.
the may.
okay.
You're not made the
necessarily
board.
forming the
This
committee.
subcommittee established shall, so if it says if so established previously, now it says established, so to me, I would say this is mandatory. So I tried out the words.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, maybe that's what
That's why
the
I
process was at the time as well.
Well, my preference would be to have the flexibility to
I
decide
have no problem with
of
that.
whether, and that should be up to the
Yeah.
chairperson and.
If so
feedback,
established,
All right, so we'll,
Right.
so we'll go back to if so
if
established.
so
Yes,
established, yeah,
if so
perfect.
established.
Shall review the board's rules.
Yep.
And offer recommendations to modify the rules to the full of the board for discussion and approval. Did you want to set the hard cap to April of that year? I know we discussed that in the bylaws committee to kind of set a deadline so that it's not like
Yes.
lingering throughout the year.
Yes, I
Okay.
think that's appropriate. If you're gonna, if the committee's formed, we would want it,
Want it
the
by April?
culmination of that done by April.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any other comments on that? Otherwise, I
Right.
could just suggest a final
I
version.
just
of
have
resolution.
two comments, and this was what I found when I compared how you had incorporated 2:3-6 into 2:3-5.
Yes.
So I just went back to check that the points that had been in 2:3-6 were indeed in 2:3-5. And if I could bring your attention, I'm looking at the clean copy, and I'm on page 23,
Clean
which
copy?
is actually 2:3-5, number 5,
Mhm.
and letter B. And I'm wondering if that should read as it does in the, before, when you had order of presentation by itself, inserting after applicants, and/or applicant's attorney shall also submit documents.
Okay. You're looking at the clean version, what page? 23?
23, the very first line.
Red line is page 22.
Oh, applicants shall also submit such documentary evidence or exhibits upon which
And,
they.
in the prior draft.
Oh, you mean like add applicants or their attorneys?
Right.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, I don't see why not.
and
Yeah.
or applicant's attorney,
Yeah. Or their
attorney.
attorneys. Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
And
I mean,
then-
traditionally, when you say applicants, it refers to like, how do I explain this? Not the applicant specifically, the individual applicant, because an applicant can be like, a business, as an LLC or some kind of entity, right? So when it says applicant, it refers to, it's assumed that it means everybody on their team, including their attorney, engineer, what have you. But
Yeah,
but I understand what you're saying. So there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with adding word to it.
and before it
Yeah.
had been worded, the applicant's attorney shall also submit.
Right.
So I just took it from
Yeah,
what
no,
it
that's
was
fine.
before.
Yeah, no, good catch.
And then on item number 6, on that same page where it says interested parties and/or objectors, I would have inserted not represented by an attorney, question applicants and/or witnesses, since if there are interested parties or other objectors who are being represented by attorney, that has to be done by their attorney. So
I see. So
just-
interested parties and other objectors
Right,
or
so
their
number
attorneys.
6, interested parties and/or objectors not represented by an attorney. Question applicants and witnesses. And then it would flow into number 8. If there are any interested parties represented by an attorney, all questions must be posed by their attorney.
Mhm. Okay, so I see, so for number 6, real quick before I even get into that, I just noticed that the number list is screwed up and like 5 is repeated twice, so we gotta just pick that up. But what is currently number 6
Right.
would read, interested parties and other objectors and/or their attorneys question applicants and/or witnesses?
Well, I thought it was not represented because not
Oh, I see.
represented by an
I
attorney.
see what you're saying, yeah. Okay, so non-represented at the beginning.
Right, because 8 talks about.
Exactly.
Right.
Because 8 says when they are represented by
I
an
see.
attorney.
Okay,
And you might want to then reorder it. I would think if you have interested parties who are
actually-
represented by an attorney, then if you have interested parties who are not represented by an attorney that want to be heard, you would hear them after those who have representation. So then it would just kind of flip-flop what's number 6 and number 8.
my thought is actually, eliminate number 6 and move that to the beginning of number 8.
Oh,
You could do that.
Yeah, non-represented
That would be better.
interested parties, yada, 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 then it goes straight to if there are any interested parties, kind of keep it all condensed into one section. Which I think makes sense to follow after, because I guess theoretically, you know, when you're giving the public an opportunity, you're also giving an opportunity to objectors and other interested parties to ask questions. And by other interested parties, there could be somebody who's, you know, entity that's represented, but they don't take a position on the application,
Yeah,
just, you know. for-
understood. My only question
Yeah.
being those represented and not represented.
Right, I got you. No, that makes sense to kind of distinguish,
So,
so,
so then you would combine
yeah, just add that.
number 6 and number 8?
Correct.
Or you'd
Add-
add a sentence to number 8?
Yeah, just add, basically just take what you're suggesting for number 6 and add it at the beginning of number 8.
Gotcha. So then interested parties and/or objectors not represented by an attorney question applicants and/or witnesses,
Yep.
followed by if there are any interested parties represented by an attorney,
Yep.
et cetera.
Yeah, makes
Yep,
more sense.
exactly,
Okay,
yeah,
got it. That's all that I have.
okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any others?
And then just to go back to the annual bylaws thing, I guess, in the review, just to give you guys the final version of that language, it would be, so we can vote on this tonight if possible. It should read, at the annual reorganization meeting, the board chairperson may appoint up to 4 board members to a subcommittee established for the purpose of reviewing the board's rules. This subcommittee, if so established, can't read it, shall review the board's rules and offer recommendations to modify the rules to the whole of the board for discussion and approval by no later than the first board meeting in April of that calendar year. That's how it would read,
Yeah.
adopted
So
tonight.
question for you, then whose decision is it?
It would be, as far as forming the committee,
Yeah.
be the chairperson.
Yeah,
Should
that
it be,
not clear in
should
there?
it be a consensus of the board? So it'd be, you know, blah, 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 if the board so deems, something like that?
Yeah, obviously, I would take input from the board, but it's just a matter of how do you want to codify that? Do you want
But is
to,
it
right?
because
I
it's,
mean, that's what you're getting
is
at.
it because it's bylaws? Is that your concern? As opposed to a normal, regular?
Yeah, I
committee?
mean, not that I have a concern of anybody here, but a chair in the future that decided to
Because it's the
bully this
bylaws
through,
committee.
No,
they
But they
appear
would
to
still
have
have to
the,
get board approval for whatever the heck they're trying to bully through. So I would think that it would have to come from the board, the issue.
yeah, I guess I'm just looking, if you could read it, just the first sentence one more
Yeah.
time.
at the annual reorganization meeting, the board chairperson may appoint up to 4 board members to a
Okay.
subcommittee.
At the annual reorg meeting,
Yes.
if a consensus of the board
Right.
is to review the bylaws, you don't like that?
I don't think that's where it's
Consensus,
reading.
I don't know.
I don't think that's where it's read. Can you read it again?
As is or with?
No,
Okay,
Yeah.
as is.
Rewind.
At the annual reorganization meeting, the board chairperson may appoint up to 4 board members to a subcommittee established for the purpose of reviewing the board's rules. That's the first.
Okay, all right, so that's strictly the chairperson's
Right.
decision,
Under the way it's worded, yes.
whether or not the board wants to do it or not.
Right.
Is that the way we want it?
can I just, for clarification, this is just because it's the bylaws?
No, I understand.
Not any other committee, just the bylaws?
I understand.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't disagree, because you never know in the future, and
Right.
it could be something material.
Or it could say something like the chair may ask for a vote to review the bylaws.
If the chair's that out of sync with the board, they're not going to get voted in as the chairperson to begin in the reorg meeting.
Funnier things have happened.
Right, no, I hear you. And that's why we want to get this straight. I mean, I don't know how you build a consensus, though,
A simple,
just.
If the
Simple
majority
vote.
of the members of the board
Shall vote.
find it prudent, the board chairperson.
there you go.
Okay,
That's fine.
so the 5-member, you know, if
Yeah,
more than
whatever.
5 members or whatever.
And then if, once established, the chair may.
I just want to
appoint
make
up to
sure
4.
that's consistent
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
MLUL, that we could
Yeah,
just,
yeah, it's, you know, this is one of those more, you know, discretionary
right.
things, like this is your
Okay,
creating our rules here.
I'm totally comfortable with
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so at the annual reorganization meeting, if a majority of board members then present finds it prudent, the board chairperson
Why don't we
may
just
appoint-
make it mandatory? It's done every year for 4 months, and the chair.
Yeah, but it may not be
Necessary.
relevant and necessary. I mean, we may have other more pressing issues. I just don't want to make something
Yeah, you have a-
necessarily mandatory.
That goes, it's the same point.
I guess it
in
would be a
different way.
quick, it could be do a quick review.
So one of the ways it works on the township committee for police roles and
Yeah.
regs,
Mm.
at the very first meeting, that's something that we vote on. And usually that's rubber stamped and it hasn't changed from the previous year. But if there is discussion, then it ensues that.
Then a committee
Right,
is created.
so it could be, it just be, at the reorg meeting, the board shall vote on to whether or not to accept the bylaws in the written
As-
form, blah, blah, blah. And then that's your stage gate for whether or not you,
Then
dig
you're
down
off in
now.
the
Right.
front row.
but the whole event is 10
Right,
seconds.
10 seconds. I
That's
like
right.
that.
So your point is, you know,
Yes.
before going to the meeting, that you may want to change anything, and if
Yeah.
you do want to change it,
It's like
then you vote
reviewing the minutes before a meeting.
before me.
Anybody have a problem with the bylaws,
That's right.
blah, blah, blah? Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good. Do it that way.
Can you capture that?
I'm trying to.
Good luck.
So are we just gonna leave that to a majority of the board members at that point in time? That's essential for what you
Yeah.
suggested, Scott, I think, right?
I think what we're suggesting is just simplified and more.
Right.
At the reorg meeting, the board shall
Yeah, the board votes on it.
shall vote
Yeah.
to accept the bylaws as written for the ensuing
You're
year.
talking to. So
The
every
current
year you have to
bylaws.
re-vote on the bylaws.
Correct.
Basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
And if there's a
dissension.
dissension or a thumb down vote, then a committee would be created and at the direction of the
Right.
chairperson to evaluate that.
Right.
And come back with a suggestion.
Right. This way, it's actually a little bit cleaner. It forces everybody to
Right.
kind of think about what they're
I
voting
like
for.
that. So that is a shall.
The board shall vote to re-adopt.
The existing bylaws, whatever form they're in.
Not in favor of such a document. The board chairperson shall appoint up to 4 board members to the
Yes.
subcommittee and go from there. Right?
Yep,
Sounds
yes.
good? Okay. All right, so then, I think I got this thing. All right, so I think the way we want it to read is, at the annual reorganization meeting, the board shall vote to re-adopt the existing rules, and if the board does not vote in favor of such adoption, the board chairperson shall appoint up to 4 board members to a subcommittee established for the purpose of reviewing the board's rules. This subcommittee, if so established, shall review the board's rules and offer recommendations to modify the rules to the whole of the board for discussion and approval by no later than the first board meeting in April of that calendar year.
It's
Well,
pure legal poetry.
It is.
Beautiful.
I couldn't have wrote it better myself.
Then we'll have to read 3 times to
Yeah.
figure out what's.
Yeah.
And you realise we've still got about a month
we
and a
went.
half to change it.
Right.
'cause it
Right.
has-
And I
Still
don't,
got
you
April.
said up to, it's still up to 4 board members, right?
Correct. Well, you need to have no more than.
Right, no,
4.
yeah,
Up to 4.
Up to 4,
Yeah.
right,
That's fine.
okay.
Perfect.
Okay. There's probably a simpler way to write
Yes,
that, but on
yes.
the fly, and
Yeah.
you know. Okay. So I think that's it. So if everyone's cool with
Any-
it, then I think we can
Any
adopt
other-
as amended and move on.
Will you give it over to the zoning board as well for their review? Will they
Yeah,
change theirs?
we can forward them the copy, right, Deb? and-
I'm sure there's some language
Yeah.
that
Yes.
they may want
Chris, you'll
to.
send me the final.
Yeah,
final,
yeah.
final,
I'll put a final one together.
And then I'll put it, and then I'll get it on the website.
Yeah, yeah. Either tomorrow or Friday. No,
Great.
Thursday. I got a busy day tomorrow.
Yeah, just so the numbering's all checked, so just
Yeah.
do a good typo
Yeah,
check.
of
through
course,
the
yeah.
whole
Any
document.
typos, any misnumbers would also, or, yeah, misnumbers, is that how you say it?
Mis-
Incorrect numbering, that would also be corrected as well, if
Gotcha.
it's there.
Okay,
All right.
if we're comfortable, is there a motion to accept?
So,
As amended?
As amended for
As
our
amended.
discussion this evening?
as amended.
I second.
Okay,
Committeeman Lavender,
Yes.
Mr. Hands,
Yes.
Ms. Dill,
Yes.
Mr. Laverario,
Yes.
Ms. Ogins,
Yes,
Mr. Opalka,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson,
yes,
motion carries.
Well done.
excellent.
Very good. Good job, everybody.
Thank you all and thank you especially to the subcommittee that helped
Yep.
to roll up sleeves and work through that, so great job. Okay, next is an update on the state cross acceptance process. So I don't know who has been designated for Mr. Jones. Mr. Hands, are you
No, that's fine, I'll take it.
provide just a quick, brief summary of where we are?
Yeah. Actually, this would be easy on Zoom meeting, but I guess we can't do that. So you're going to have to bear with us as we walk through this a bit. So firstly, Tom did a great job putting everything into a spreadsheet. So now we've got a number of tabs to the spreadsheet: timeline, goals, the survey, yeah, and then the questions, and then we included the map, a map for reference, and then just put in the state plan's comments about the area that we are in. Okay? So having said all that, so I think last time out we talked briefly about, the plan itself. So I'm not sure if anybody's gone back over it in much detail. I'm sure you could probably speak more eloquently than I can on the whole plan, but
I don't know about that.
but it's basically 10 goals, economic development, housing, infrastructure, et cetera, that the state's looking to sort of suggest and recommend that everybody's looking at within land use with the same sort of lens of certain subjects matters, right? So some of the things, climate change, infrastructure, equity, planning, town planning stuff. So that's all good, right? So I'm not going to go through this in detail because it's one of these things you probably have to sit back for a few minutes. So I think the challenge right now is to think about what are the important things that we should discuss as a board, perhaps. What are one or two questions that you think about as a board and you may want to opine on before we submit something, presumably to the township, to go to Morris County to submit to the state, okay? And there is a meeting at Morristown on Friday. I think Bob and I hopefully will attend, all being well. Maybe get some more...
This Friday?
This coming Friday
Okay.
at Morristown. So some of the questions... So let me just back up a bit further. The planning area that we are in, and it's quite an interesting one if you ever look at the map and go online and look at the map. But we're in this planning area PA5, which is designated as sort of sensitive, environmentally sensitive planning area. Okay, which I think is interesting, but bearing in mind Warren, I think is which is metro and Berkeley Heights is urban, something along those lines. So there's a very distinct border where we are because of basically the river and the floodshed and the swamp has designated us very much in the environmental sensitive area. So we're on that side of the equation as opposed to the urban build-out of the surrounding towns to us, just our neighbours, right? So I think that's quite an interesting thing to just be conscious of as we think through what does this all mean to Long Hill. So having said that, so as an environmentally sensitive planning area, there's some guidelines, and as you can imagine, they're more focused towards environmental, right? So some of the things are, and firstly, some of the categories of to be an environmentally sensitive area, population density of less than 1,000 people per square mile. So we're, per the master plan, 11.8 square miles, 8,629 people, so it's 731 people per square mile. So we do fit that metric, which is good, right? And then some of the things that we talk about are, or the intent of the planning area is to protect environmental resources, protect both large and small contiguous areas of land, promote restoring habitats and biodiversity, accommodate growth only in centres. So that's the sort of things to think about. Confirming programme sewer and public water services to centres, revitalise cities, towns and older traditional settlements. So it's all then centres and revitalisation, and protect and enhance the diversity of the existing character of stable communities. So it's not saying from that we have to mass build out and do lots of development. That's the way I would read it, Bob. I'm sure we have some different opinions.
What was that density number?
It was less, our density is, this is just my simple math, we're 8,629 people. 11.8 square miles, hopefully I'm right. Is that 731 people square mile?
Right, it's less than 1,000.
It's less than 1,000.
And so what do they consider to be the maximum population according to their density?
The designated for this area is 1,000, a lot of the others per square mile. Some of the
So-
others are over 1,000 per square mile.
Right,
So
so
we're
that's
well
one of the
below it.
categories.
So we're below that cap.
Right.
So which is good. 'Cause, one thing I didn't want to think, oh my gosh, are we over that? Then it's like, is that a debatable point? Thankfully, we're nicely under that. And then they go into some criteria about, and some of this stuff is, not really drought production, water. So there's about 10 criteria that I don't think are overly important to us at this point in time. The main point is the environmentally sensitive area surrounded by urban. The environmentally sensitive is still Harding as well, so anybody in the swamp and a bit of chat and some areas of Chatham, as you can imagine. So that's sort of the guiding principles we can work from. Does that all make sense as a quick background there?
I think just to interject too, I mean, one key feature of our master plan and certainly our conservation element was to promote and pursue as a goal to update an environmental resource inventory. And I think we as a board need to support our environmental commission
Yeah.
and really put that up to the fore, especially now with this cross-acceptance process, identifying us in that area. It puts even more of a premium on making sure, because you got to understand what you're protecting and what the inventory is of the environmental issues.
Okay, but it's important to recognize that that classification, if you will, is the same classification that the township was in the last plan from 2001.
Yep,
So
so that didn't change.
that didn't change. The category is a little bit broader now. In the prior plan, there were a couple other classifications or groupings that combine them now. So, but it hasn't changed where they have placed the township itself, because the criteria stayed the same.
So the criteria for the density stayed the same, so it was the same, or is it now, are you more dense to still be in this?
I don't know what, I didn't check the density of the
I didn't
prior.
go back to look at
we can
all
check.
of the criteria in the 2001 plan,
Uh-huh.
but it's like, I think it's up to 1,000 people, and the smaller criteria was like 100 people per square mile or something.
Right.
Which we wouldn't have met
Right.
under any circumstances in 2001.
I'm just wondering if it was like 800 or something previously, right? And we were close before, and now all of
No,
a
it's
sudden,
not.
they've expanded for everybody
Right.
at this point due to the growth of the county. That's all.
Basically, what they're saying is that this 11.8 square miles can support up to 11,800 people.
And still be,
And so that begs the question, where would you put those people, and what would you need in terms of services and schools and
Correct.
this, that, and the other?
yep.
So those are all the things you start getting to think about. So I'll just finish off the perfunctory stuff, so just set the background, and then to those points, those are things we should discuss as the board as to how we want to respond to the questionnaire. Okay?
Remind us again what the deadline is for a response right now.
End of
Is that,
March 31.
I thought it was
March.
March 30th.
yeah,
I
that's- I
think end
thought it
of
was coming
March.
up pretty quick.
So let us, and I think when we had Jessica here, it's like, yeah,
Well, it could
Yeah.
be extended.
maybe,
right.
maybe, we may get a better sense on Friday, a more formal, hopefully, at the meeting, presume. But yes, right now, end of March. And we did also talk about potentially having a meeting to discuss everybody's points of view, so we then can submit, assume to the township committee, or the township administrator. Who's going to submit the
Yeah, I
plan.
mean, that's the other thing is, what's the deliverable? What's the document that gets submitted? Do you know, Chris?
I believe I think it's a questionnaire that you send.
Right.
Right.
This
I
is,
think,
this template.
right,
This-
right.
Okay,
I
so you
think the
just-
governor.
It's a questionnaire.
responding to the question.
Yeah, but just a question.
Right, and so I'm pretty sure it comes from the governing body. They send it in on the township's behalf. I could be mistaken on that, but I've heard, I mean,
But are we being invited to either agree or disagree with the assertions that are made?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go
It's-
through.
yeah.
Right,
So I
so
think-
just
right.
one point on that. You look at the boundary conditions, right, the worst case,
Right.
you start at the density, 11,800 people. Look at that scenario, could we ever support that?
Right.
Where would we put those people? How would we provide services to
Well, that would
them?
require a build-out analysis for the town.
Yeah.
Right.
But where I'm going to, you know, we need to identify what we need to either agree or disagree with,
Right.
the levers in this that have the most impact against us. And I think that density thing is like high suspect.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but we have the affordable housing that doesn't include in that number for the third round. It was the third, right? And the fourth round
Right.
upcoming,
Okay.
right? So there's at least 1,500 people. I'm just off the top of my head, 1,500 people. So we're going to hit near the 10,000 mark pretty quickly, just on what we've already been designated to, or we'll designate probably to as well. So we're going to get closer to that mark.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there any other number that we're quote unquote looking to negotiate or not, besides density?
In terms of numbers, I don't think it's in terms of numbers as crystal as that. So let me just go through the other points very quickly, and then we can decide how we want to take this discussion further forward. Because I think everybody needs a few minutes or time just to think through some of the stuff anyhow. So what are the key? So the question is, as we showed last time, a lot of this stuff is relatively straightforward. You know, we can just say things like, yeah, we have addressed this in the master plan. Like we said last time, master plans actually did a pretty reasonable job of addressing a lot of
Yes.
the things. So we can point to that reasonably clearly and confidently say, yeah, we have thought about this stuff. Okay? So I think some of the questions where we start to think about a bit more deeply is, and I'll just read, not necessarily my comments, but the ones that I think are more discussion. And some of the stuff, you know, again, just lifted, some of the responses are lifted from the master plan itself. We've addressed this by going, if you go to the master plan, you're going to see it. So hopefully that gives the confidence to people that we have, you know, conformed, if you will, with the. So now, some of the questions. If inconsistent, so let me see if I can put the background to that question. Reviewing the 10 goals of the preliminary state plan indicate the degree to which the municipality have incorporated key concepts and policy objectives of the plan. So what have we done to, or where do we think, what level, this goes to your numbers a little bit, you know. So this one, maybe we're 50%. I don't know if we can come to something like that. And this goal, we're 60%. I'm not sure we can quite get to that point. But so we've asked for Jessica maybe to help us to respond, how we want to respond to that in terms of what we've already written and how much does that conform to the plan. Does that make sense? The municipal plan versus our master plan. Maybe have Jessica or somebody try and put those numbers today and say, yeah, we've addressed 90% of this particular subject or 20% of that. And even though we only addressed 20%, that's all we can really address because of these conditions, right? So,
David, so perhaps it's higher level, but the recommendations in the master plan, would that correlate with what the state is envisioning?
we have, exactly, some of the points here were pulled out. Tom went
From
did the
our own-
exercise and said, here's some distinct recommendations from the master plan to address these points.
Gotcha.
So I think it's, so the ones where, if inconsistent, so now we go to the negative side of it. If inconsistent, how would a municipality or county become more aligned with the state goals and how will this be achieved and predicted timeline for consistency? So where we may say we're pretty confident in some subjects, there may be some areas that either we can challenge ourselves and say, well, actually, we could do a little bit better job. Okay. So the ones that I picked up, and Bob, maybe you can add on your comments as well here. I think some of the key points are coming out are reuse, repurpose, rebuild. I think I said this at the last meeting. Connect and recenter. So with those sort of emphasis coming from the state plan, yes, we talked about centering around the villages. That became a focus of the master plan. So then I'll just step back a little bit further and say, is our master plan challenging ourselves hard enough to do some of that stuff, or is it about right? Then that'd be the discussion point perhaps of the board to say, no, actually what we wrote, we think we're still consistent because we are addressing the centering and we think we're doing it in a very constructive and timely fashion.
Right.
Or we may come back and say, well, maybe we could do a little bit stronger job in one or two areas. Right? So reuse, thermoplastics always comes to mind. What can we do? We've had that as a redevelopment area for so long now. Still go, my wife, every time we go by, it's been there 20 years. Still the same, still the same. So then what that then resonates with me a little bit is how then can the state or somebody else help us overcome some hurdles that we can't overcome ourselves? Right. So for me, some of the answers back to the plan is not what we can do locally, but what can the state help us do? Right? So where do we need help? If thermoplastic is going to be another 20 years doing exactly the same thing because we can't get the redevelopment, if we weren't able to get the housing there because of the flood and all that sort of stuff, is there something that we could do better? Or rather, is there more help that we need for very specific areas to help us meet the goals that you've asked us to meet, state plan? So where do we want to broach that subject?
Did they put any time constraints around their goals?
I didn't read time. Bob, did you
Did
read
they
it?
put what?
Any time constraints
In the plan?
In the state plan.
in the state plan, in their goals?
No, I didn't read any
I
deadline
didn't
dates.
read the dates.
It's more a vision to 2050 based upon a 2025 plan.
I think so.
I don't recall seeing
I think,
dates at all.
you know, one of the things that I've seen other towns use in this type of context is use this to support appealing to the state for grants.
Well, that's why I think
Right.
this is where we should be
That's
thinking.
exactly what you turn that language right back around in regards to, you set this as a goal, great, but we need help with funding.
Because we
And
tried.
there is some language in the plan that says the plan should
Yes.
help foster
Right.
Investment by
investments in communities to address what the state plan is looking to do. It has that kind of language in it.
the state. So for me, that's one of the key avenues here. The rail, trail by rail. We can't do it alone. We need New Jersey Transit. So where can the state actually help turn it around a little bit? And there may be one avenue that we can go down. And I'm going to stop here for a second, Bob, and ask Bob to just give a couple of comments. But is it worth this? I don't know if everybody wants to read the whole. Sure, great. Everybody read the whole plan. Be fantastic, right? Absolutely. Can we maybe just send out a few points of
We would
areas of thought that we could then discuss at the board? Would that be?
Speaking on behalf of the board, we would appreciate your distillation and summary. You guys are really smart and good readers.
Yeah, it's 160 pages long, too.
Right. So, but we would appreciate any distillation down to, okay, here's what we have deemed to be the key issues. Have you guys reached a consensus, guys and gals?
I think we've got some ideas. We haven't. I've got mine. Bob's got his. Tom's got
Right.
his. We've sort of
But, you know, I
working
think,
together on that.
There's, I don't think any of us are diametrically opposed
Yeah,
with
no.
each other on
No.
what the plan says. I mean, the point that you raised, Scott, about what do you do about 1,000 people per square mile kind of stuff, that needs a little bit more research to figure out if that's exactly what it's saying or even implying. I think they were trying to set categories
yes.
for groups, but it needs to be looked at to make sure that's what it was, because they have breakdowns of village, town, municipality, all that kind of stuff in terms of size and number of people per square mile, kind of, and I didn't look at it from that perspective as could they pushing for this, right? But the other piece of it is the way the township is designated and the way the properties are defined. They're very clear about identifying the state open space, the township open space, the connection to the Great Swamp, and from my read, that's the same way it was in 2001. So I didn't get the sense that they were trying to shift something for the township. But that requires some more look back in the 2001 to see what it specifically says, and we can do that. It's a good catch. In general, I think we believe that the updates of the master plan were very timely for this because they've gone through a lot of review. They've caught up with a lot of the things that are in this plan, especially the stuff on sustainability, which we have a specific element on. The one piece that we're not relying on an up-to-date one is the Fisher housing plan and land use element, right? Or housing element, I'm sorry. That's the one that we have a committee to finish. And having some guidance from that team that says, we don't think what's in here is going to be affected by the way the plan's being rewritten. You know, I think we're in pretty good lockstep with the state plan, because it's very high level.
Right. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, though, to circle back and then re-emphasize connections of the state plan with our master plan to then set priorities. Because I think there's a convergence here that I think it's important to identify as we go through this process. I would recommend Liz Lehaney be very much involved with this because of her in-depth knowledge of our own master plan, which she was very instrumental in drafting. I think she would pick up even more. So not that Jessica couldn't do it, but I just think Liz is closer to the master plan, our master plan, to look for those connections. So what is the recommendation here in regards to how we push forward with this process?
And one more subject, just very quickly before we get to that point. For me, the watershed, the Raritan River, back to the state level thing, you've got the Highlands Council, you've got the Passaic River towns. There needs to be more of a connection, overlap between that and work together for the whole of the Passaic River. Let us go to the meeting on Friday. Let us have a chat with Tom and maybe Liz as well, and then come back to the board with a brief summary and maybe hear the 5 or 6 things maybe to think about.
Perfect.
And then we'll come back at maybe the next board meeting if we'd had
Do you
a chance.
think, what's
That'd be fine.
what's on the docket, Liz? Is this something that we could take on the next meeting
Absolutely.
without a problem?
We just
And would you
received-
be ready by the next meeting, I guess
You
is the
have a
good question.
subdivision application that I just received, but that won't be ready till the end of March, so.
Okay.
So Friday's the meeting. Maybe next week we can get something to the board. When's the next meeting?
It'd be
11th.
fun. The 11th.
That's 2 weeks away.
Right, so hold on, the response to the county is due back on the 31st of March, right? So I think that they would officially have to come through the planning board, it might be, or not through the planning board, so through the governing body, if I'm not mistaken. So I think they would need to meet prior to, before that goes out the door now, so I guess the question is, Scott, I don't know if you know, when's the last township committee meeting in March? Do you guys meet once a month, twice a month? Oh, 26, okay, so we got plenty of time,
I
okay.
have a
Just
question.
that, yeah,
Yeah,
there's-
okay.
we have-
How firm is that March 31st deadline?
Well, that's a question
We'll
we're
find
gonna
out
ask
on
next-
Friday.
On Friday.
Hopefully we'll get some
Gotta
better
ask that
sense.
question
Yeah,
too.
I mean, I think the sense is too, if you can, if you were able to show progress or something
I
like
agree with
that.
All right,
I don't know. But I
our
don't know if
second
it's a
March
hard
meeting
deadline.
would be on the 25th,
It's
right?
in progress.
Okay, so there's.
We did,
okay,
we're not
we got a date
ignoring
on
you.
it. Good.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, just want to make sure, everything's,
So let's do that. Let's go to the meeting and hope to come back to the board but, with something a bit more. Very quickly, last question, and I'll shut up. Chris, is there anything that we said tonight about the plan that you would say yay or nay to, or?
no, look, it's what you guys think is what my.
No, but in terms of what interpretation of it, hopefully we're not.
No, I think you guys are understanding it pretty accurately and how all this works. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, again, you're gonna submit your responses to the county. The county's gonna generate something that they're gonna send to the state. So you gotta see what they come back with. I mean, you could, scream from the heavens, but if they don't listen to you, then,
Right.
what's it really worth? And I mentioned this at the last meeting, but in the event that you guys disagree with what Morris County wants to submit to the state, you have the opportunity to
weigh in.
Right.
weigh in and say something.
Right, but that becomes a completely different process. Now you've
Right.
become a negotiating entity,
Right,
so
Right.
that's a
Right.
lot more work and.
yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully we don't need to cross that bridge, but if we
Right.
do, we'll cross when we come to it, you know what I mean?
Okay, so the next planning board meeting, that'll be the open discussion, hopefully.
Yeah.
All being well, and anybody from the public can opine as well.
Yeah. If they want to show
Great.
up, sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that briefing. That was very helpful, David. Thanks for the work you guys are doing on the cross-acceptance process.
So, quick question.
Yes.
So when you say 11.8 miles is the size of the town, that's with the Great Swamp,
Yes.
right?
That's the border of the whole town.
The border of the whole town.
Including what would go into the Great Swamp. yeah.
So, but there's
That's
also carve-outs for environmental areas that are state, federal. So do they change the calculation,
Do they reduce or increase the density?
increase the density
Right.
based on the actual area that could be built?
I think that'd be a question best unasked.
Yeah.
But just to agree
No.
with your point, if you look at the map, it does point out the Great Swamp, so it's an absolute right point.
Right.
It does say the Great Swamp is a park, so that's sort of off the table.
Okay.
However, they then will come back, so that's a fair point.
Because I think to Scott's point about
Yeah.
density, right? If you take that out and then they increase the density by 25% from 800 per
Yeah.
to 1,000, if they change the denominator effect here for us, that could have a pretty significant effect, so.
But if you look at the maps with what they define as potential properties for development in the town, if you were doing a calculation that was going to drive the number so high, you would have to identify a bunch of property to do that. And they've already categorized so much of the property into environmentally sensitive areas that the map that they've developed only identifies 3 properties for development,
Right.
right? And they're small, so, they're not gonna
That's
be
true.
Right.
huge. So I'm not sure that they're using it to say that the town can go to that level, but it clearly needs the research to decide if that's what
Right.
they're implying in any way.
So I guess then if you could get a comfort level, as you said, about the 3, that they have thought about it, and they've said these are the ones
Okay.
areas you could redevelop, so therefore obviously you would think then they've maybe factored in everything.
Right, no,
So I think it's.
I just want to make sure that they don't, when you go to the meeting, right, because this is the open period where people can make comments, and if somebody goes in there and says, we should really be looking at this for areas that have higher jurisdictional laws that say that, you can't, we're not even going to count that. We're going to change
That's
how we view all the towns going forward by taking that out of your effective
Right.
area.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair, absolutely fair point, thank you.
Okay. Moving along, it was mentioned during your briefing about the housing element, and I can give a status that our board planner is diligently working on that draft document, and that is due to be out in March. So we will assemble our subcommittee or committee around that and support Liz in regards to that. It's highly numbers-driven, a lot of statistics. If you look at our older housing element, it's one of the drier elements. Not a lot of language, mostly tables and figures. But Liz is assembling all that. We should have that by March, and then we're going to start coalescing that with the affordable housing plan that Jessica is working on to bring that all into one. But we do need to go through as a planning board and opine and then review and approve that housing element as part of this process. And we'll come up with a date and so forth to do that. Ordinance Review Committee, anything more to share? Is anybody, Teresa, do you want to?
Yeah, we've all been honestly missing each other the past few weeks, but we still have the sheds ordinance, places of worship, and we've been working on the villages ordinances. The tricky thing with the villages is it touches so many other ones, and once you kind of open that can of worms, you want to make sure you're hitting all of them. Honestly, I've been trying to get with Liz, but based on your comment, it makes sense. Maybe I've been missing her because she seems busy with something that might be a little bit more important.
Yeah,
So-
well, that's a huge part,
So that makes sense.
the housing
Okay.
element,
Okay, great.
right, but she still should have
Yeah,
capacity.
no, that's fine.
definitely.
I'm glad I know that now.
Right.
Yeah, and Tom is obviously the chair of the subcommittee, so hopefully next meeting we can. I'm curious. I don't know, Don or the whole group. Like, I know we had that chart, the flow chart that Liz presented, which is great. But like, how do we actually start getting that moving along? Like, because I know we brought the sheds here, but there were a lot of opinions, and so then we took it back.
Yep.
And so now what are we gonna keep bringing, I'm using the sheds as an example, are we
No,
gonna keep
it's a good
bringing it
example.
back and keep getting more opinions? Like, at what point do we say,
Enough, right,
well,
Yeah.
and like now it's gonna move to the next step?
right.
So just I think as a group, we can.
I think
decide.
we were getting close and then we lost some momentum. The problem too is if we pick it up and put it down for too long,
Yeah,
then people have a whole different set of opinions. It's funny, as I walk around town, I notice more sheds out of compliance than I've ever seen in our
there's some
town.
rule about that, I forget, some
Right.
like German
Right,
philosopher or something, made a
right.
rule about that, but,
right,
maybe.
yeah.
And then Scott, I don't know from your perspective, like simultaneously we have the ordinance that came from you guys that we're reviewing for consistency, and I'm trying to implement in my comments here that you'll see, I'm trying to implement some of the same principles, even from the ones that come from you guys, which is like consistency, clarity, and all that.
Right. And just to clarify, I mean, the just to clarify the issue of this is not a land use ordinance, so this becomes a little bit challenging for
Yeah.
us to comment on as a board from that standpoint. We're
Okay.
not asking for a consistency review in this case. So I think that what we're proposing to do, instead of even discussing this, is that we've got some great comments that were provided, is I'll forward this to the board, the township committee
Yeah.
attorney,
Exactly.
copy of the mayor, et cetera, and they'll have the comments.
Great,
You know,
okay.
so that, yeah, just because we've got a lot of work, we've got enough work to do on the land use side, than having to review
Yeah.
lots of other ordinances that come in.
I guess we just need to decide at what point are we, as a planning board, gonna take chunks that the subcommittee is working on and saying like, okay, we're now gonna put, I think the next step is the township committee for the first review.
Yes,
So,
the first reading, right,
First
yes.
reading.
Yep, yep.
and I would love to do that with those three. And, and I'm sorry, Deb, you had also said, like, I was kind of in my, I remember one day I was like zeroed in and I was working on all of them and it was like, she's supposed to be doing that, right? Liz, sorry.
Okay, well, yeah, so what she will do is, when we are at a point with certain things, sheds, whatever we're looking at, maybe, 3 at a time, she'll put that into the ordinance, and then it's just really a matter of the board adopting.
But when you say put it into an ordinance, do you mean like write it into, because I was like writing it,
Well, these are
And then-
amendments to an already existing ordinance.
Right.
So what she's doing essentially is just doing an update to give to the township committee.
Right, versus a brand-new
Correct.
ordinance.
no, I
which
know,
would
I
be
mean, I
very
was doing it in
different.
track changes.
Right,
Because it's 2025.
right,
And I'm not like striking out and making things red.
right.
Is that okay to do
Yeah,
it in track,
I-
like?
I would think so, 'cause
But
that
then
would-
why, but that's kind of what I'm saying, like, can I do that to move this along with some of them, or because I don't wanna,
Yeah, you can, whatever you present to the board, if the board it all says, yes, we love this, send it to the township committee, then you give me the permission and I send it.
Yeah, and it's their responsibility to synthesize that into a written
Right.
ordinance for adoption. You know, there's two ordinances, right? There's, you know, I think what you're referring to is the code, right? That's where everything's kind of laid out. An ordinance per se is just a, you know, that's what they vote on and adopt, and then it becomes
Gotcha.
ordinance, right?
Okay.
So like,
So whether it's an amendment to an existing land use ordinance,
Right.
or if it's a new land use ordinance, right? It goes to the township committee, once they do 2 of their readings, then it comes back to us for consistency one last time.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch in track changes, David. I don't know if you agree, like, that we're in a decent place with some of them to, no?
Yeah. I think that.
I don't know how to get everybody on the same page to bring.
I just hadn't looked at it. I'll be completely
Oh,
honest
it's
with you.
fine. That's fine.
I just hadn't. I was waiting to. I just got stuck in this, as
Makes
opposed to
sense.
going to that.
and
So,
another-
just because
another-
of the time.
You
That's
don't
all.
need to
Just another critical element that we are making some movement on is Joe's work, our township committee
Yeah, I saw
engineer,
that.
updating the zoning maps, because those were woefully out of date, getting overlays synthesized, and he is, now I think that's become almost a top priority for him to complete that. 'cause
Oh,
now
well, then
there's a
maybe I'll
num-
talk to him, because some of these are
Yes,
impact that.
absolutely, and it was very hard to, like you said, open up the
Mm-hmm.
box and then not have accurate information as to the zoning, the way the zoning overlays and what has evolved since really 2016 in a lot of instances.
Can I,
And I'm sorry, and interject, that, and if you feel like, if the committee feels like you're at a point with something that you're working on, be it sheds or the villages or something, that you know, you're having an issue behind the scenes, then bring it to the board on an agenda, and
Okay.
that's what we're here for.
yeah,
We-
yeah, so-
And then we sit here and I'll talk about it. If the problem is, you can't talk about it with other board members behind the scenes.
Right, we just need to
You
do it.
can bring it to the agenda anytime.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're gonna vote on it, doesn't necessarily mean you have to vote on it, you know, but you can, so if the committee is at a point where you're like, oh, again, we're struggling with this, then put it on the agenda, give it to us to put on the agenda, and you have a discussion about it.
So the next
So-
meeting, let's put it on the.
Yeah, well,
agenda.
we're gonna bring sheds, but, well, I'm not gonna be at the next meeting.
well,
Sheds, places of worship, and
Can I,
the villages. And
lem-
hopefully we can bring those and at least get a consensus from the planning board. And I'd love to get that moving, and then we'll pick the next 3. And I think, like you said, momentum is a
Yeah,
real thing.
and-
let me, can I jump in here for a second? I wanted to get this point across. Because we want to, you know, I think Tom had kind of like a playbook for all these ordinances, right? And we need to think about the pipeline here, the process, turn this into a machine so we start
An
cranking
assembly
through
line.
these. And so let me say what I have to say. We create these ordinances here. They're going to be markups of existing ordinances, right? Our output here is an agreed upon markup of an existing ordinance which addresses a checklist on Tom's thing. That goes to the township committee and Jack Pigeon. It's discussed in public. I would like to have a planning board member there besides myself because I'm on the committee. Because I don't think we want the committee looking at these things cold and freewheeling. And like, well, I don't think, I think Barnes should be read. You know,
Right.
it happens, right? So someone from the planning board, not me, who can stand up and participate in comments and educate the township committee on exactly what was the intent and how this connected back to the master plan, right? Because
Set the basis for the.
because honestly, I mean, 8 people here should probably be close to the pin and land this within a centimeter of where it needs to be without everybody having to
So, yeah,
hit the fire hydrant, so to speak,
Okay.
right?
And
Alternate.
I'm happy to attend too, because remember, everything we're doing here affects my position also as zoning officer.
Right, because what we don't want to do is to just get into
Yes.
vapor lock where we keep spinning around
Right.
these
Agree
things
with that.
here, and then we spin around the township committee, and then it comes back down, and nothing gets done.
Right, good point.
Right, so that, you know, that's the pipeline. I think it's important when it gets to the township committee that a planning board member is there, and Deb yourself, you know, to kind of give the gloss on exactly what we were thinking when we did this in reference to the master plan.
Well, I think you're right, Scott, too, because I think that a lot of questions come up too, especially since we as a board cannot take, input from the public when we are sitting and deciding. you as the township committee can.
Right.
So if something comes up, I think it's very, a good idea to have.
Right, and objections will come up, and the committee will not be able to answer them because they don't have a PhD in the master plan.
That's fine.
Yeah, I
Good.
think that's a good idea.
All right, I think that's a good plan.
Yeah, my goal for 2025 is to get momentum, because I think we all have been looking back and going like, gosh, we've been holding these, at least the
Right,
sheds
right.
for a long time.
Right.
Right.
Isn't
Let's
that-
get some of the low-hanging fruit,
Yeah.
plucked off the tree.
You would think it would be low hanging,
You would
right?
think.
You would think, but obviously it's not.
I think
Right.
Scott's point is the important one. Like, we have to figure out how to systematically do this, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's every one of these meetings, just have one on the topic at this point,
I think-
just to
I was
have
just gonna suggest, that's a good
just to
idea.
have something to discuss, right? Because
Yeah.
I feel like Teresa is doing a lot with the
Yeah.
committee. Like, just put one on here to get the discussion, so we're not getting bogged down, and you guys are working so hard behind the scenes.
Right.
But it also brings up topics that we may not be thinking about, and this way, to Scott's point, we kind of get in the habit of doing this.
And I think we prioritize these over other stuff that just seems to come up out of nowhere, like this thing that was sent to you guys to review from the committee.
By the township committee, yes.
Right.
Without
These
being
things here
presented.
should be prioritized coming
Right.
out of here,
Correct.
right? Because we've deemed it to be, these are all the things we need to fix, as opposed to other ideas which just seem to
Right.
float out of the
Well,
air.
well, the timing is good because we do not have a lot of applications, so this is,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
I
our
love
window,
seeing
because then all of a sudden we could get very busy with applications,
Sure.
and it's gonna be harder to find time for that.
I don't want to speak for Tom, but he did have a spreadsheet going, and
Yep.
if I think one thing that he had said in the past was like anyone here that identifies other ones that like I don't think Tom, because it's a lot for one person or even for three people to identify every single ordinance that needs to be changed. So and if you identify one, ping me, David, or Tom, and it can be added to that pipeline. I will try to one of these days, this week or next, sit down and do some of that work, which is, I think, looking at the master plan itself and then looking at our code book and, but just,
Another key input is, we've got to put some pressure on, I guess it's Liz working with Ed. We need input from the zoning board.
Yeah, that was
That's an important report
I'm
that
willing
they
to have that for
provide
you
in
guys.
regards to what are they tripping over. Because
Oh,
they're on the
okay.
front lines with a
Oh,
lot of
yeah,
these
okay.
ordinances, is to get that information, which
Yeah.
would help inform us in regards to what should be prioritized as well.
Yeah, and that
So
will
I
take-
thought that,
yeah.
I mean, I think are they working on it? Have you heard anything more on that?
Not yet, yes and no, because I have to put, basically what I do is I put everything together, all the applications from the previous.
Yes.
And note, okay, well, this was impervious coverage, this was bulk I kind of noted, and then I basically distributed it to, the two professionals, three professionals, and they give their input as to, into all these areas, like, for instance, we have seen dozens of impervious coverages, the zoning board has seen in the past couple of years, so that's
Right.
gonna be,
A
major
right
point of
issue.
discussion.
Okay,
So it's just a matter of putting it all together, and based on, just the timeline, I'm hoping to have that to you guys by the first meeting.
great, perfect.
So you know the downside of all this now is no more cancelled planning board meetings. Because there'll always be
Yeah,
something
there'll
to
be something
we'll
to
discuss.
do.
make them
Right.
quick, we'll make them
Yes,
quick.
exactly.
Or consolidate
Okay,
them.
speaking of quick, any other new or old business? Great. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.